is people who will get you far in life. Everyone's talking about resilience, but focusing on the youth, the students of today's world, the faster we are able to bounce back, the more resilience, the more powerful we are able to thrive in a challenging world. About the youth, first thing would be the academic pressure. That's one of the things that many people compare Singaporeans with other countries. From my understanding of my friends who work and grew up in or who grew up and work in India, the pressure is no less than Singaporeans.
Hello and welcome to another super special episode of my podcast. It's Navigating Life with the Human Compass. Now, why the word human compass? Well, this podcast basically is aimed at connecting teammates, it's aimed at connecting with colleagues, and of course, more importantly, ourselves. Why? Because it's that human compass that guides us, channels us in this world of so much of gadgetry and social media. And to talk about that, we have a very special guest joining in from Singapore. She's Dr. Maxine Teo. Hi, Maxine.
Hello, Santosh. Such a pleasure to see you again.
You too. So Maxine is the MD of Global Max Academy. She's based out of Singapore. She has a doctorate in psychology. And she is the author of two amazing books. In fact, I have read both these books. One of them, in fact, I got covered in. So the first one, of course, is The Secret Manual of the Sales Warrior, and the other one is The Secret Manual of the Engaging Warrior. So much of amazing content that Maxine speaks about in this book, writes about actually with her own experiences, with her clients, interactions, cultural issues across locations, geographies, all that and more. So here's Dr. Maxine Teo, who is amazing personality to talk to. I met her way back in 2021 as part of my organizational training, and I was like, oh, she is one day on my podcast, and there she is. So hi, Maxine, and welcome to this podcast.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be on your show, Santa.
Most welcome. Maxine, the first question I have for you, and this is something very much related to my guest who was on my first episode. We spoke a lot about personal resiliency, where it's very important to develop that kind of resilience in today's young minds, right? So in today's work environment, it's so challenging, right? Because it's not about just that work-life balance, but it's a lot more to do with the social media pressures, peer group pressures, So what are your views on personal resilience?
Oh yeah, this word has been such a buzzword in the past few years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think everywhere around the world that I've had the opportunity to provide training and speaking, everyone's talking about resilience. But focusing on the youth, the students of today's world, I would relate personal resilience to one of the learning agilities, if I may quote the Korn Ferry's 5 dimensions of learning agilities, and that relates to the one on change agility. See, resilience is like when you're able to bounce back, right? When you and I, we've been through a tough time as well. And the faster we are able to bounce back, the more resilience, the more powerful we are able to thrive in a challenging world. So when it comes to students and young professionals of today's world, as I mentioned just now in my second book, I focus on the 4 different generations. The Gen Z, as we call them, they are the very protected generation, right? We have young children and we love them with all our heart, and they may not be as resilient or tough as our generation or those before us. So if there's an area that I would really recommend that we need to work on with them, with the youth, is on change agility, because it's the ability to stay flexible. Right? When you're flexible, you can adapt to new circumstances and embrace change positively. Some will embrace it grudgingly, but we want it to be positive, because nowadays with the technological advancement and jobs are constantly evolving. What didn't exist in our time, there are new jobs in today's world, right? And that's where it's very essential, especially amongst all the other agilities, that our youth become more adaptable in this case. Right? Change agility helps them to quickly adapt to quick challenges, absorb new methodologies, as well as all the different shifts in industry trends.
That's a very interesting point you made about the industry trends. Maxine, you have worked with across geographies, across cultures. I'm sure
Mm.
each country, each location where you met people as a part of the training sessions or otherwise, you had a lot of, there's always a common denominator probably. What you see in, in the life skills of these guys. Maybe if you could share a couple of them, and do you think that's a very specific Asia kind of a trend that emerged?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought out the part about Asian or the Western because that's also something I have studied in great depth. Is there a difference in the first place? Generally, yes.
Okay.
From my personal experience of having lived in different parts of the world, I find that generally speaking, in the countries where we are faced with less entitlements, with not as many privileges as the government would provide, we tend to be more resilient and adaptable. So the common denominator that shouts out loudly to me, especially I've worked with people in different countries coming to Asia, and I find that though the common one is their adaptability. So the faster they are able to assimilate to the country they are into, and that's where the faster that they thrive. So that's where I noticed that those of us who are more adaptable, we will quickly learn how problems are solved. We learn how to adapt our communication approach, and we learn how to put ourselves in the shoes of the people of the culture that we're in. So I think, and especially if we are talking about which of the denominators should we really cultivate amongst not just the youth, but in everyone in the working world, is really adaptability, right? Because it will allow us to effectively manage change and embrace opportunities, as we mentioned just now. And this will cut across different generations. So just like I mentioned, East and West, I think generally, of course, people from the West may dispute that, but there are always two sides to a coin. They generally, when they are used to their own culture, having lived there for a long time, to come to Asia, it can be quite of a culture shock. And I'm sure yourself, you've been living in Hong Kong, and yeah, I have many friends who are British, who are from Americans. They stay in Hong Kong for 20, 30 years, and they don't even speak a single word of Cantonese. And
Absolutely.
yeah, unlike you who have been there, you know the conversational Cantonese and you assimilate, you are
Suits you.
adapt.
Suits you.
You still, oh yeah, very good. So there you go. I think the common denominator that would really help every individual, be it the older generation or the youth today, is adaptability.
That's a very good point, Maxine. But with specific reference to Singapore, where you have been most part of your life, you interacted a lot more, not just with students and youngsters and young professionals, but also with Singaporeans. And typically when we think of Singapore from outside, from India per se, we look at it at a very very structured community, a very structured, disciplined world. And then when you see step out of Singapore and you come across other, professionals or trainers, I'm sure you find that distinct difference out there. But are there any common experiences that you find, where our Indian folk can learn from?
Mm. So your question is about what we can learn from Singaporeans or the youth?
Yeah,
Which
yeah, your
would you like?
experiences. The Singaporean youth, maybe it's not more about learning, but maybe again understanding their culture, because it's a different society. India is a different society. It's not a comparison of two
Mm.
societies. Having said that, is there any common learning, probably, for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a huge topic. I could focus on some areas.
So,
I think if we are talking about the youth, first thing would be the academic pressure. That's one of the things that many people compare Singaporeans with other countries. From my understanding of my friends who work and grew up in or who grew up and work in India, the pressure is no less than Singaporeans, right? Because in fact, you have more pressure because
yeah,
by sheer numbers, right? You all have like billions of people, and we have just 6 million
yeah, the
people.
competition is very intense, competitive in India. I agree. Yeah,
Yes, but the common denominator there is we are less in numbers, which means that as a small country, we have fewer universities and we have more competition.
yeah,
All right, because the country is small, so everything is less. So less universities, less places to fight for.
Yeah,
And in India, I see the similarity is you have many people and many universities, but again, not all universities are what the locals in India would want to go to.
yeah,
And same thing applies in the workplace. A lot of, from what I know, a lot of my friends from India, they are overqualified for the jobs in India, and they're not being remunerated fairly. As a result, they leave the country to pursue opportunities around the world, and many
yeah,
of them have come to Asia. And I think if we compare between the two, because when my friends or contacts from India, they come over, they are hungry. So when they're hungry, they are competitive, they are hardworking, unlike a Singaporean youth who are a little bit more entitled. We have they have a little bit of competition, but in our case, when our kids can't make it, we send them overseas.
yeah.
Parents are affluent. So if you compare, I find that youth from India are a lot tougher than youth in Singapore, if I can do a direct
Yeah.
comparison.
Okay.
And yeah, but it has got some positive outcomes from there because when we face competition, we thrive as well. So I think overall, whatever seems to be like a different thing, it could actually add as a catalyst to
Okay.
motivate both parties.
Wonderful, wonderful. Any top two or three life skills that you think one needs to imbibe, one needs to embed in them, especially with reference to young professionals or students who probably are, at the university level and looking for a career break.
I think if there's time to only talk about one, I will focus into emotional intelligence. I think if it's about critical thinking, which is important, adaptability, which is important, all those can be acquired, right? I mean, so can EQ be acquired. But the thing is, it is least taught in schools. Right? In schools, we equip our students with tangible skills,
Yeah,
technical skills. But the people skills is usually acquired through trial and error, right? Through hard bumps in the world.
yeah,
And if the family doesn't cultivate that kind of a learning environment, that leaves the youth to figure it out on their own in the workplace.
yeah,
I think if this can be made a conscious effort be made to equip students with the ability to communicate effectively, to learn how to read between the lines, to adapt your behaviors based on how the other person responds to you. I think that will really make them a lot tougher. And that is a life skill that has appeared continuously in the future of work that the World Economic Forum does a survey every 2 years, right? It constantly pops up as number 7 or number 8 out of the top 10 skills. So absolutely, if I would strongly recommend that any organization, any environment that we work in, to really make this as part of the curriculum to help our youth of today to become more people-oriented, because it's people who will get you far in life.
absolutely. Absolutely. Can't agree with you more, Dr. Maxine. Well, Dr. Maxine Teo, who is the business owner and managing director of Global Max Academy, she's a psychology doctorate and, of course, the author of two amazing books, as I mentioned. One, of course, the Secret Manual of Sales Warrior, and the second one, Secret Manual of Engaging Warrior. Dr. Maxine, thank you so much for being on my podcast, Navigating Life with the Human Compass.
My pleasure, Tandeva. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Yes,
you.
my
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Bye.
Bye.